Registration is open for the Telarus Partner Summit happening July 31st to August 2nd at the Gaylord Texan Resort. Come and get the most current information on industry and technology trends at the pinnacle education event of the year. We're going to have 3 general sessions, 40 educational breakouts, a 2-day trade show, over 118 suppliers, a technology demo center, 2 award shows, a 5K run, and of course, some parties to remember. We're excited to welcome as a keynote Josh Linkner, an inspiring entrepreneur who built and sold 5 tech companies. Yes, 5 tech companies. He also became a New York Times bestselling author, created over 10,000 jobs, helped launch over 100 startups, and wait for it, created over $1 billion of investor returns. Josh will be teaching us his breakthrough innovation framework and how every problem can be solved and every opportunity seized. We're also excited to hear from Alan Stein Jr. Alan has learned from top leaders and coaches and then worked as a performance coach for some of the highest performing athletes on the planet, including NBA superstars Kevin Durant, Stephen Curry, and Kobe Bryant. He takes those lessons learned and then will teach you how to achieve more from your sales efforts. More sales revenue, more team cohesion, more loyal customers. You can achieve more by executing the basics consistently. Go to Telarus.com/PS to learn more and register. Welcome to the podcast that is designed to fuel your success in selling technology solutions. I'm your host, Josh Lopresto, SVP of Sales Engineering at Telarus, and this is Next Level Biz Tech. Everybody, welcome back. We are kicking off a new cloud track, and we're going to get nerdy on you for a minute, but that's okay because we're going to try to make it fun. The title of this week's track is, what are the top 3 ways Kubernetes can help your customers? And if you have no idea what Kubernetes is, that's okay. We brought the smart guy on today, Mr. Chad Mowery, Cloud Solution Architect at Telarus, to help us break it down. Chad, welcome on, man.
Thanks, Josh. The pleasure is mine. Thanks so much for the invitation.
So Chad, before we get in and start talking about Kubernetes and containers and advanced cloud and all kinds of good stuff, I want everybody to get to know you just a little bit. This is kind of my favorite part of the show, is where we get to hear everybody's journey. Where did you come from? What did you do? Have you always been into tech? Did you start out, scrubbing concrete and cleaning floors and then want to get into this? Or give us your journey, man. How'd you get here?
Wow. Well, I don't know that we have time. Actually, I also wanted to back up and you mentioned at the beginning there that we were going to get nerdy. So sometimes that's a compliment, sometimes not so much. I choose to take it as a compliment, though. My journey started, I think cleaning bathrooms. Maybe I should go back. So first computer I ever had was right out of high school. Windows 95. So I've loved technology, computers ever since then. I remember as a teenager working for my uncles, and they made jokes about me being a car salesman. And it was funny because I would have been considered an introvert at the time, right? As a teenager. I guess I probably really wasn't exactly. I don't know if a closet extrovert is a real thing, but I don't know. It just changed over time. It was probably 8 years from when, and I distinctly remember that joke for some reason. It was probably 8 years between when they made that joke and later, and there I was working for them in their small auto care business as their service manager, service advisor. I was handling all the customer experience, all the scheduling, all the selling of services, et cetera. Also happened to be doing the IT. I mean, it was a small shop, so they had one computer, and the database was like super tiny. But that's kind of where it started. Actually, backing up a little bit, I guess to take a page out of Jason Stein's book, I actually went to Bible college, so. Before I worked for my uncles just doing cleaning bathrooms for years while I was a teenager, and then going to college, and then went full time after that. And before I went full time for them as a service advisor, I had started going back to school after Bible college for my associate's degree in network administration. because I had loved, as I mentioned earlier, I love computers and technology, and so I wanted to do something there, I think. But working for them as a service advisor and working with people, I realized that I like working with people.
Right.
And I didn't want to sit in front of a computer 8 hours a day or 10 hours or 12 hours or whatever, right? Doing code or anything like that. But I figured I'd had to, to graduate and start, at the bottom, right? In the back office probably, or basic IT or something. But after graduating, I did have some difficulty finding jobs and lived in a rather rural area. So I worked for my uncles for a while. But eventually I stumbled into a job in IT sales, solutions consulting. It was a company called iNetU Managed Hosting. That was back in 2007. Probably should have left that out, since I like to pretend that I'm much younger than I really am. But 2007, and I've been in the space ever since. I guess it's varied kind of a lot, but it's also same. I guess I view it as being at the intersection between technology and business, right? So started out direct sales, solutions consultant was the title there. Moved into helping build kind of an inside sales and customer service organization with a big emphasis on technical acumen. From there, moved into solutions engineering, and eventually to my role here at Telarus as the cloud solutions architect.
Love it. I think we can say there's a reoccurring theme now between religion and technology that we seem to pull people over from. So either way, third one, we'll say it's a trend and we'll investigate it. But for now, we'll take it. So
I've got to talk to Jason sometime. I've never really talked to him in depth. What happens in Bible college stays in Bible college. I think that, no, you know what? I think I made that up.
I think it's the opposite. Yeah. Love it. So talk to us, right? Your role is solution architect for cloud. And so a lot of folks might know they're regional engineer, but maybe they don't know some of the solution architects. So break down for us, for any partners that are listening to this, what's the focus of your role?
So, Josh, a theme for me lately, I think, is a reminder of the why, right? Ask the why. So I want to answer that by saying that the simplest why for my role at Telarus is really to help partners find and close more business. That's the simplest. I mean, that extends to multiple facets, right? Whether that's, helping with some training at, an Ascend event, one of the events that Telarus puts on, whether that's an individual partner set of meetings or trainings. It's varied, right? But at the end of the day, it comes down to, the biggest focus is helping in an individual opportunity, or helping a customer find opportunities, not a customer, but a partner, find opportunities, ask questions, figure out what questions to ask, and, moving to help them close more business. And obviously my focus, of course, is on the cloud vertical specifically, right? So that's my swim lane, if you will.
Beautiful too. And I think, obviously we tout certifications and so many of these conversations that we're brought into, people don't know you, right? And in some cases, right, when the partners bring us in, the customers don't know any of us. So the certifications, we have to flex on those for a second. There's a couple big ones that you got. You want to let everybody know just what those are?
Sure. So I guess the main one is the Boy, now I'm blanking, Josh.
AWS, baby, AWS.
No, I know, but what they call it, solutions architect, I think. Yeah, associates, solutions architect associate. Also the security. Now that one's currently expired. I need to renew that. I've had the solutions architect associate certification 2 different times now. Of course, the base cloud one that they call
Yes. Cloud practitioner.
Is it practitioner? Yeah. I think you're right. Practitioner. I got the Azure 901 also, obviously others, but I think those are the big ones.
Yeah, and the value in that is that I think it helps people understand that we get what the customers are going through. We understand the pieces and the moving parts of the puzzle, so we can help them figure out what's broken or what needs to come next. So love some of those are huge certifications. So it's awesome. Let's talk about changes. I want to talk about out there in the marketplace, right? If we look at what we used to do years ago, let's talk. Actually, hang on. We gotta pop this on here. I think that picked it up. Let me re-ask that. Like I had a... All right, let's re-ask that. Okay, so let's talk about some changes here. If we flash back 5-10 years ago, we were not having cloud infrastructure conversations. People had equipment, they were putting gear in data centers, and that was it. Infrastructure as a service was not as prevalent as it was now. So let's talk about modernizing cloud infrastructure here. So give us just I know this is a very modern talk track with Kubernetes and containers, but maybe just walk us through a quick couple-minute evolution of why are we talking about modernizing and Kubernetes and the next step in infrastructure?
Oh, you said quick, huh? So when I started working for INETU Managed Hosting, it was, which probably nobody has ever heard of. I should spell that INETU, and of course it's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. It was, acquired, etc. But we did dedicated servers. That was the primary thing that we were selling. So back in the day, you did dedicated servers, and people would do, you could put a bunch of applications on a dedicated server if you wanted to, a bunch of websites, whatever you wanted to do. But you put a bunch of websites on there, then they have the ability to impact each other. It's on the same operating system. So any issues with that brings the whole thing down, all the websites, all the applications, et cetera, et cetera. The other challenge with a dedicated server approach was, or maybe I shouldn't say the other challenge. So what happened then with a lot of times people would separate, right? So they put a physical server or multiple for high availability for each application. And the problem there is, of course, you get a lot of physical servers, and you've got to build each application, if you will, if that's what you're doing, for peak load, right? You've got to be able to handle peak. So you might need multiple servers. And then, of course, most of the time you don't have peak load. So you're way overbuilding. You have all this CPU and memory sitting around. And not only do you have that per application because you built for peak load, you have a whole bunch of applications. And if they've separated them out, now we're starting to talk all kinds of extra CPU, extra compute that's just it's just unutilized. So that's not efficient. So hence virtualization, becomes a big thing again, and goes mainstream. Obviously, VMware is the big name out there in the space that most people are familiar with. And what that allows you to do is take that same hardware and put a bunch of servers on top of it. So virtualization is all about trying to efficiently use your hardware better, right? You put a bunch of low utilization VMs on a single piece of hardware, ideally not a single piece, multiple for availability, for hardware, failure tolerance. But you can put a bunch of servers on what you would have, used to only put a single application on. And then you still have that separation between each of those servers or virtual machines, because they're living inside of each of their own operating system environments. So, that was the next iteration, if you will, and that's very common. Most businesses are virtualized heavily these days. Now, containers or containerization, of course, Docker is a big name in the space. Kubernetes, as you've mentioned, these are probably terms that people are here floating around out there. It's really kind of like the next step, because what that does is it allows you to put an application, multiple applications. You can still separate them inside of what's called a container, which is really a way to run a set of commands and instructions inside of an operating system. So you put multiple containers now inside of an operating system. So if I had a whiteboard here, we would draw a physical server. On top of that, we'd have virtualization and a VM in there. And then inside of that VM, you can have containers potentially, right? So containers go inside of an operating system, and you can have multiple containers. Gives you the ability to have separation between your applications. So you're limiting some of the problems that one application can cause another one. That's the benefit of that separation. But then you're also taking advantage of, again, the efficiency of the underlying infrastructure, hardware, resources, because now you have a bunch of applications, again, inside of one operating system. So what you're doing with containers over virtual machines, the benefit of containerization over virtual machines is mostly about the ability to only have one operating system that hosts multiple containers and still has some separation. A downside of that, a lot of times people don't realize this, is that you do have to have the same operating system. So you can't run a Windows container on top of a Linux server OS. Like you can't mix and match. You're going to have to stay in the same vein, if you will. I don't know how far you want me to go here.
No, I think that's I think that's a good spot to pause, because
Okay.
I'm actually gonna throw in one other thing, and then I'm gonna come right back to that, and we're gonna nail down really what the track is, what this is about, which is about the three ways. So I wanted you to lay the baseline down for. I think you painted a great picture on the evolution. So pause on that. I'm gonna come right back to that. So hearing that and seeing some of the conversations that are out there and with partners. We get a lot of partners that listen to this podcast that maybe are in CX or are in network or have done some SD-WAN sales and maybe haven't ventured into cloud infrastructure or didn't know that Telarus could help them, or that you were here, or whatever. And so what do you think that, from your perspective, right? I mean, we get pulled into some great conversations with customers, and rarely is there a time where we can't help or we don't find an opportunity. So what do you think maybe, what are some of the reasons of why partners avoid that? Is it just the knowledge of the understanding of some of the things that you laid out, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, confidence, I guess, is the word that I would use, right? It's a complicated space. Like I don't understand it all. Nobody understands it all. We all have our own little piece of knowledge and expertise. And I don't know. Now I'm getting philosophical here, but that's important to me.
We'll allow it. We'll allow it.
Okay, all right, good. I think we each have our part to play, and everybody knows something that the next person doesn't know, right? So confidence, I think, is really it, and confidence comes from practice. There's the phrase "fake it till you make it," and of course, you can argue that a little too far, maybe, and we want to be sincere. We don't want to be faking, but you got to try. And I think that's about asking the questions. And of course, one of the main reasons that the solutions engineering team, the solutions architect team exists here at Telarus is to help partners gain that confidence through practice, right? They can start by talking to us, bringing us into conversations. I love to talk to a partner that says, "Hey, I want to sell more cloud, right? How do I do it? What questions do I ask? How do we do this?" And I'm happy to sit down with a partner like that who's hungry, if you will,
Yeah.
excited, wants to learn and put in the effort, because it takes some effort, and say, "Hey, what kind of meetings do you got coming up? Let's talk about what companies they are. Let's talk about how, what questions we might ask, and then let's talk again, and let's practice together, right? Let's see how it goes." And of course, I'm happy to join conversations, once an opportunity is found, but I'm also happy to talk with a partner in advance to help them kind of get rolling with some of that, a little more confidence, and get
Good.
it started, right?
Yeah.
You need repetitions. You got to
No.
practice.
Great points. Great points. All right. So let's come back now. I want you to pin down. I think you did a good foundation on how we got from hardware to virtualization, which a lot of people still use, to the next evolution, which is Kubernetes. So recap for us, what do you think those top three reasons, right? If I'm a partner and I'm listening to this and I'm going, all right, this sounds cool, I can go take this and I can tee up some conversations. What do you think the top three reasons then, to recap kind of what you said, are why Kubernetes and why containerization helps down a customer? Because then I want a partner to be able to take those and go, Mr. Customer, are you experiencing any of these issues or these things that are on your horizon? If they are, then let's have a conversation about it. So what are your top three?
So my top three. I mean, unfortunately, when you boil this down, it gets a little generic, right? But my top three are efficiency, portability / scalability. And then this one's a little different, I guess, process or discipline. So any enterprise that wants to make gains in those three areas, I think, can benefit from containerization, and it should be at least a topic of conversation. It doesn't mean, just because we have a conversation doesn't mean containerization is immediately a fit, or it's probably something that should be on the horizon for everyone. If they've got applications or custom applications, they should be aware of containers, what they are, and how, what the benefits are, and where they might want to plug them in the future, or utilize them. But yeah, those are my top three, and of course, you always got to go back to the why and explore the conversation can get pretty deep fairly quickly as far as like, all right, yes, we're interested in efficiency. So how can containers improve our efficiency? So then we can, dive in on that. And
Yeah.
I think that hinges a lot on, I don't know how many folks listening have heard the term modernization of applications. Actually, Josh, I think you mentioned it earlier in one of the conversations or one of your questions, and I didn't really elaborate on that much. I think we should do that here at some point. I don't know if now's the time or if
Yeah,
we should save that for later.
I'll come back to modernization. No, it's a good point.
All right.
It's a good point. So, all right, I want to get into the weeds maybe a little bit here on a deal. So we get to see all kinds of different crazy scenarios from a customer perspective. Customers that have a very, very advanced environment and maybe need a different kind of help. Maybe it's more of a skills-based outsourcing to help with a project, or people that are very early on that maybe haven't even left that application out of the one piece of hardware, right? And haven't done any of that modernization that you're talking about. So walk me through maybe just an example. We can leave customer names and partner names and stuff out of it, right, for security purposes. But maybe just walk me through an engagement. And what I want people to hear out of this is, I think what you'll find is that we tend to find more just because we ask a lot of questions. So maybe walk us through an example. What'd you find? What was the problem? What were you told the issues were? And really, how did the engagement go?
Okay. So first, I want to bring back up the why, right? So and you know what? A term that I hear a lot, a buzzword, if you will, in this space, right? Selling technology is business objectives. And we talk a lot about reminding ourselves, what are the business objectives? We want to build solutions that match or meet or solve business objectives. Totally true, but it's used so much. And I like to simplify it back again. So why? Like, why are we going to do this? Like, why do we want to use containers? Does it make sense? And should we? And it's always a risk reward or a risk/cost versus reward equation in all of life, in my opinion, right? But especially in business, right? If you have existing applications and you lift and shift them to the cloud as they are, like, so they're individual virtual machines, it's going to cost more money in the vast majority of cases, right? There's usually exceptions to rules, but that's the rule. You need to modernize, which is the term I mentioned earlier, first, in order to take advantage of cloud services. And that's again a bit of an area, and I don't want to go too far down that road because it's a bit of a tangent from this question. But so coming back to this question, a particular situation that I have run into, and I think I'm not going to mention customer names. I'm going to mention a name. I think it's okay because it happened years ago and it's public knowledge. But Parler, right? And let's leave the politics aside, regardless of how you feel or don't feel or whatever. Parler, their business, if you will, right, was dependent on AWS. And AWS made the decision that Parler was violating their terms of service and shut them down. So they were scrambling. And the reason obviously it was in the news, but I was actually in a position in the past where I was part of some conversations relating to that whole situation. Parler was down and they were trying to figure out how to get back up, right? So I got to, just touch a little bit of that excitement. Didn't get to get involved, but saw the opportunity, if you will, right? To just, pull back a little bit of the cover there. But since that happened, that is, well, one, it's opened my eyes, but I think it's opened the eyes of other businesses as well. And again, we're going to go back to risk reward here, right? If you've got a business and it's completely beholden or dependent on one vendor, like AWS or hyperscaler, that's scary, right? There's various reasons that like your business is, probably never fully in your control, but you're putting a lot of eggs in one basket, I guess, if you will. And if your business is small and you're barely getting off the ground, that's probably worth the risk. You haven't built something that's that big that it's yet a concern. But at some point, if your business is large enough, you probably don't want to depend on one vendor. And so you should look at other ways to deal with this situation. And I mentioned a little bit earlier in the conversation that if you lift and shift existing applications, it's not efficient. Well, most of the hyperscalers' answer to that is serverless, right? So let's go serverless, which is basically like we have all this infrastructure in place, and if you just follow our rules of how you run code, you can build an application that works and looks like a website to end users, but's actually only hitting our, I mean, there's still servers behind there, right? But only hitting our servers, our infrastructure on the back end, and we'll just charge you for whenever you hit our servers, or pay by the drink, right? Everybody likes that term, pay by the drink. Sounds very efficient, right? Actually, I'm gonna use that example, right? Pay by the drink. Pay by the drink is cheaper if you don't drink a lot, right? So if your applications don't drink a lot, which is why you modernize an application so that it drinks sparingly, it practices moderation, if you will. It's great. But if you have applications that are legacy, which drink a lot, they need a lot of resources just to run or to exist, a lot of virtual machines, etc. You're better off buying the keg, right? You don't pay by the drink. You buy the keg and you throw away a little bit of flat beer, if you have to, right? It's just like, these are principles that I believe apply to all of life, and that's why the lift and shift into the cloud is not the way to go. So if you've got the idea, all right, we are I just lost my term. What's the term for conservative? You're not drinking too much. I just used it anyway. If you're efficient and you don't drink too much and you pay by the drink, it makes sense to go to AWS. So their answer is serverless. Lambda is one of their serverless offerings. A lot of people may have heard of that. If you write your application to use Lambda, it's pretty efficient, right? It's cost effective. Problem is, you can't move that somewhere else very easily anyway, right? You can't run it on your own VMware stack. You can't run it on your own physical servers. You can't run it in Azure. You can't run it in GCP without rewriting the application. That's not efficient, right? Risk of rewriting an application, huge, right? Cost of writing an application, huge. So now I'm going to go all the way back. I tell long stories. Parler, right? They were stuck. They were dependent on AWS, and they figured out how to move and whatever. But other businesses saw that and said, "Whoa, that's scary." And I worked on an opportunity where a business came to us and they said, "Look, we can't have this happen." And so I was working for a provider that, at the time, who said, "Hey, we can help you build private cloud. And we can run something like VMware's Tanzu." That's not as common in the industry as far as a term. Probably, I don't know how many listeners have heard of that. But Tanzu then allows you, and I think this is where the future is headed, right? Businesses need the ability to be able to containerize and then move those containers so that they can run on AWS, on Azure, on GCP, on the private cloud. Because again, sometimes a keg is actually more efficient. Or actually, a keg is always more efficient, right? You pay less if you knew you're going to need a keg. It's cheaper, right? So there's still a place, even if you're pretty conservative in terms of the drinks consumed, a keg is still cheaper, right? If you're using this. So there's this place where instead of going all serverless with an individual provider like AWS or Azure, AWS's Lambda, and not being able to move, you kind of split the difference a little bit. It's not quite as efficient to use a container approach, but it then starts to give you that flexibility to, I can move, from one hyperscaler, AWS, Azure, right, GCP, to another. And, and I've run into more than one situation there. There's also situations where customers are looking to save money. If they get really large with any one provider, then they start to feel like, hey, are we getting the best deal, right? Or are we using their services efficiently? Are they helping us the way they should be helping us? And when everything is dependent on that provider, then they feel like they don't have options, right? So vendor lock-in.
Right. So the reality in this is that from a modernization perspective and from a use case perspective, it's complicated, right? There's so many dependencies on, is containers a good fit? Is it the right fit? Is dedicated hardware a fit? How do we auto scale? Which providers, tools, and technologies that we use? And I think you brought up, you called out a lot of good examples where the reality is it just depends. But the important part in this, to kind of bring back the example that you mentioned, was that, look, while everybody struggles with a lot of the same things from a scalability, cost, business, staffing perspective, sometimes containers are a fit and sometimes they aren't. So I think you laid out some good examples where, it just depends. So I think that's important. I want to call back to one final thing here as we wrap this up. One or two quick thoughts. If I'm a partner now and I'm listening to some of the things that you just mentioned of how complex some of this journey is, or who it's a fit for, who it's not a fit for, what some of those business drivers are, and you're giving me questions to ask, what are one or two of those questions that I then go back to my customers, my prospects with to see if this is a good fit, to drum up a conversation about cloud and modernization?
Yeah. So first, let me say, Josh, there's so many more things I'd love to share, but I know we're running short on time. So as far as questions to ask, I mean, the first question is, okay, does the business / customer, do they have applications, right? If they're running applications, then containerization should be at least something they're aware of and have considered. And you can bring that as a partner to the table. And even if you don't know anything about containers, I'm here at Telarus. I would love to have a conversation with you and your customer about it and help explore whether it makes sense. And again, like I said, it's going to come down to a risk / reward, but I can help navigate like, okay, here's the reasons you would want to use it. And, tell me, Mr. Customer, what your situation is. And, then I can sort of help lay out some pros and cons of what makes sense. So first question, do they have applications? And if they do, containerization should be at least a question. Beyond that, if there's a custom application, especially that ups the priority, if you will. And then last, are they building new applications, or applications sort of the lifeblood of their business, or applications they've written? Then really, man, if they're not looking at containers and understanding where they fit, then I really think that's super important, right? They need to look at that.
Okay. Final thoughts here as we look forward to the future. So this is a fast evolving space, right? We're talking, halfway through 2023, moving into 2024. We've mentioned infrastructure. We mentioned containers, the next evolution of serverless, where it's infrastructure as code. You look out a year plus. Do we need to do anything different other than kind of the talk tracks and the discussions and the conversations that we've mentioned so far? Anything different that you see coming down the pipe that's going to change things?
Every day is a winding road. Change is happening. It's going to continue to happen. I don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future. I mean, I think that we're going to continue to see, like we've seen with what I call the hyperscalers, AWS, Azure, GCP, with those coming into prominence. The thought track was it's cheaper in the cloud. I think that people are starting to realize, okay, that's not necessarily the case, right? And that goes back to my pay by the drink / keg example, I think, right? I think the next iteration on that conversation is, okay, we know that it's not cheaper, we shouldn't lift and shift, but we're building new applications. How do we build them, and how do we solve this, and how does the cloud fit? And so I think people are going to continue to be more intelligent about how they utilize cloud and containerization / vendor lock-in / serverless. All of these technologies and concepts come into play and need to be part of the conversation. And we're going to continue to see more of that. The uptake is going to take time, right? Just like cloud is cheaper, it took a while for that myth, if you will, to be dispelled. And because it's not in all cases, there is a place, but not in all cases. The same thing I think is going to be true of containerization and serverless and some of those things, right? We got to see where each piece fits, and enterprises are going to continue to learn as they go, and they see the need to learn, and as they see more need to learn, that I think opens up the opportunity for the partners to the evolution sometimes seems slow, but man, the opportunity is really, really vast for partners.
Yeah, great wrap right there. All right, Mr. Chad Mowery, Cloud Solution Architect for Telarus. Chad, thanks so much for coming on, man, and sharing some stuff about containers with us.
Thanks for the invite, Josh. Appreciate it. Real pleasure.
All right, everybody, that wraps us up. I'm your host, Josh Lopresto, SVP of Sales Engineering. And if you got any feedback as this podcast grows, we would love to hear it. nlbt@telarus.com. Please share that with us. Until next time.
Next Level BizTech has been a production of Telarus Studio 19. Please visit Telarus.com for more information.